It seems as though every week on Parliament Hill has been extraordinary, wild, or just plain surreal. But this one topped them all. After drawn-out bitter infighting within the Liberal caucus, Justin Trudeau finally decided to tap out. The move came after an ever-increasing number of his own MPs and prominent Liberals called for him to step down. The self-proclaimed fighter will soon be done as Liberal leader and as Prime Minister, but it opens up many more questions. Who will step into the ring to fight to become the next Prime Minister, and how will that process unfold? There's a changing list of who's in and who's out, but Foreign Affairs Minister Mélanie Joly and Finance Minister Dominic LeBlanc have both ruled out entering the race to focus on their current jobs. For those who will be running, the entry fee is steep, $350,000, and the deadline is quick, coming in on January 23rd. The cutoff to be eligible to vote is the 27th, and a new leader will be announced on March 9th, who of course will also be the new Prime Minister. The opposition parties are vowing to take down the government with a non-confidence vote shortly after Parliament resumes on March 24th. And that, of course, would pull the trigger on an election. Joining us now to discuss this is former Liberal Deputy Prime Minister Sheila. Great to see you, Sheila.
Thanks, and wonderful to be here.
What a week it has been in Canadian politics and for Liberals. Who do you think the next leader of the Liberal Party should be?
Well, I have my preferred choice. I think I hope she runs. I think she's going to run Karina Gould. She's young, she's dynamic, she speaks several languages, she has a great international background. But also I think it's going to be a rebuilding process for the party. So you want somebody who's prepared to stick it out for the long term, because some of the names that have been mentioned, like Mark Carney, for example, I think he'd like to be the Prime Minister. I'm not sure that he'd like to lead a process of rebuilding, which may be what we're facing. I'm not for sure, but it could be.
And it's a long process. If Canadian politics holds, it's often 8 years to 10 years of one government, 8 to 10 years of another government. A lot of folks, I think, hope maybe that if they come in with a big name, they could rebuild the party fortune. Do you think that the name is going to make a big difference in terms of the Liberals' vote in the next election?
Well, it's interesting because the 60-day countdown is quite scary for anybody who actually plans to run, because literally by the time you cross the country 2 or 3 times, your 60 days is over. But with social media and the new technologies, that might not be a problem. But it actually stands in the Liberal favor if there's an election, because let's supposing you go forward March 24th, the government falls, there's an election called for the last week of May, or let's say the long weekend in May. For the new leader, there will be a bump, and that bump historically is very short. But the election period is also very short, and there's a G7 meeting in June in Kananaskis where they're going to want to have the new leader of whoever the party it is. So that little 2-month window for an election could actually play in the Liberals' favor if they get somebody that people feel is dynamic and popular. But it's an uphill battle for sure. They got 20 points to climb.
The opposition was critical of the Liberals choosing to go into a leadership contest instead of an election. What's your view on what's best for the country?
Well, I think obviously Mr. Poilievre wants an election because his numbers are good, but I think it would have been crazy to go into an election with Prime Minister Trudeau for the reasons that were well articulated by himself and also by the party. I think he's going to go down in history as a fantastic Prime Minister when you look at reconciliation, childcare, dental care, pharmacare, so many wonderful things that he's done. But any politician has a limited shelf life, and my mother always used to say that it's the only job where the more experience you get, the more they want to get rid of you. And everybody was ready to get rid of him. So it would have been a mistake to go with him. I think they needed to have a leadership process. It would have been easier to do starting the end of last year, but these are the cards that have been dealt, so that's what the party has to do.
Do you think he waited too long to resign?
I think the writing was on the wall. And of course, when Chrystia Freeland left her position, that was sort of the last straw. But I think the message was clear in the summer and building into the fall that in all parts of the country, people were looking for change. And unfortunately, when that sets in, there's not much you can do to stop it. It's just politics has a certain shelf life, and for most leaders, it's about 8, 9, 10 years. And the only way you can extend that is by changing the face of the person who's leading the party. Will that work? Not necessarily, but it could. And it'll certainly make a more interesting race than if we had gone into it with with Mr. Trudeau in the state of popularity that he was facing. It would have been, I think, very difficult for the party, but now they have a chance.
He has very close advisors who have been with him for a long time, including his chief of staff, Katie Telford, Dominic LeBlanc, of course, since he was a child, they've been friends. One of the criticisms of him has been that that group he's consulting with was too small, and that's part of what led to caucus feeling alienated and that group had stayed too long. Do you think that that was a factor?
Well, I think any time a leader is in politics, actually, Mr. Mulroney's former chief of staff gave me some good advice when I became a minister. He said, get out of Ottawa, because one of the problems that you have when you are the leader is your circle becomes smaller and smaller. And the only way that you really hear the pulse of the people is by getting out. So yes, that was an issue for sure. If you look at the whole rollout of the Chrystia Freeland resignation / departure, that was not handled very well, and that could have been predicted. So it was a mistake, adding on to other mistakes, but at the end of the day, it's on the leader's head himself. You can't blame the EA or the chief of staff or whatever, because the leader is the one who makes the final decision.
He is staying on, as we all know, until a new leader is chosen on March 9th. That's been met with both praise and criticism. Some people say it's great because there's a steady hand on the tiller. He's not distracted by a leadership race, so he's able to focus on dealing with Donald Trump. Others say he's a lame duck prime minister. He won't be able to negotiate. It should have been an interim leader. What are your thoughts?
Oh, I think for 2 months it makes no sense to bring in another interim leader, because an interim leader also has a learning curve, and the PM knows the files, he knows them well, and now he can speak freely in a way that he never could be that free as a future electoral candidate. Sometimes when you're leaving politics, it's the best time of your life. Mr. Chrétien decided not to go to the war in Iraq when he was leaving politics, and it was probably one of the best decisions he made. So maybe this is going to liberate Mr. Trudeau to speak freely to Mr. Trump, who needs to be told, to talk about annexing our country is just not on.
When you look at this leadership race, one of the things some analysts have speculated about is whether people are going to have to overtly distance themselves from Justin Trudeau in order to win. But you also have to win over caucus, who've been a part of this. What kind of ideas do you expect we're going to see, and sort of how friendly or vicious do you think this race is going to get?
I think it's too short to get vicious, and probably that's why you're seeing some people deciding not to run. Mélanie Joly is a case in point. I fully expected she would be a candidate, but the time frame is tight. The status of the party is tough. So I think it's going to be a fairly friendly race. There may be I think it's going to be issues based. I don't think people, if you look back on Trudeau's legacy, it's going to be a very good legacy. He's going to come with the likes of Pearson, who started healthcare, Medicare, and Canada Pension Plan, stuff like that, because the things that he has done are really groundbreaking. When it looks on Indigenous issues, there is nobody who put Indigenous issues on the forefront in the way that Prime Minister Trudeau did. So he may be unpopular right now, but history will look on him very kindly, and most of the party candidates will just have to focus on, I think, whether their focus will be on kind of economic rejuvenation and also making Canadians feel valued again, because I think post-pandemic, a lot of Canadians are stressed, and we probably don't even all know why. There's like a whole stress level attached to the cost of living, to the inflation cycle that we've been on. So it's scary, but I think you need a steady person to give confidence and hope.
And Mr. Trudeau talked about that in a CNN interview on Thursday. He basically said that he thought that he was gone more because of feelings than facts. Imagine that'll be a polarizing statement in itself. One last question I wanted to put to you as we're talking about Trump in this critical time for the country in a very complex world. Do you think that if cabinet ministers want to run in this race, they should have to step away from their portfolio because they're distracted, or does that also raise the risk that we could lose a big chunk of cabinet who now decide they want to be the Liberal leader?
I think given the time frame, you need to build a roadblock. We used to say Chinese wall. You can't say that anymore. But you need to build a distance between the ministerial responsibilities and the leadership responsibilities, because if you were to change all the cabinet ministers who run now, that's another cycle of change, which is probably not going to be healthy. In terms of the public, and the whole issue of prorogation, the government's still functioning. We have some fantastic public servants. We've got great people on the ground. And with Trudeau free from the leadership question, I think he'll be able to manage the till until we get to the 9th of March and then beyond.
Former Deputy Prime Minister Sheila, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for the invite.